All right, should we kick this off?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right. It's a little bright, so it's hard to see out there. But thank you all for coming this afternoon and sacrificing your lunch hour. Right, it's 12:30, right?
Yep.
So sacrificing your lunch hour to hang out with us for an hour. I'm Rick Scherer. I'm a principal engineer with EMC and run a blog site. Can I officially say I still run a blog site?
Yeah, it's pretty lame,
I posted
man.
something yesterday.
You're really phoning it in.
It's still on the web somewhere.
I'm still trying to find my
And not
niche.
just on the
He just had
web
kids.
archive, right?
He had twins. He's pretty
That's
busy.
true, yeah.
Yeah.
We can't get you some slack for that.
Okay, perfect. So run a blog site, VMworldTips.com, and this is a panel session I've done now. It's our 8th year, and it's a lot of fun. It's open forum, so actually I'll talk about rules in a second, but first and last, thank you all for taking the time and hanging out with us. Hopefully this session is fun, informational, educational, and mind-blowing.
Face-meltingly awesome.
Melting awesome.
You're really selling it, Rick. Come on.
Did you have
That's
a
up to you
Valium
guys.
this morning or something?
I'm very mellow, just hanging out. It's been a long week, but so yeah. With that, I want to have as much time as we can for the audience. So real briefly, let's just go through and introduce ourselves, and then we'll get started and have some fun. Right. So Scott.
So once again, thanks for coming, everyone. I'm Scott Lowe. I work for VMware in the Network and Security Business Unit. That's the NSX team, responsible for product direction and product strategy, looking out 18, 24, 36 months. Blog.scottlowe is my website, and at Scott_Lowe on Twitter.
Hi, I'm Chris Wahl. I'm in my own business unit of one person at Rubrik. I'm the technical evangelist. I run a site called WahlNetwork.com. For my blog, I'm at Chris Wahl on the Twitter, and I wrote Networking for VMware Administrators. So.
And your blog has gone up in the rankings, I think, like the most over the last 2 years.
I went from like 200 or whatever to
It's awesome,
I
dude.
think it's 8 or something right now. So yay.
So, hello everybody, my name is Chad Sakac. Thank you for the time and thank you for being customers, partners, et cetera, et cetera. You can follow me on Twitter at SAKACC, which is last name, first name, and I author a blog, virtualgeek.typepad.com. My day job is I lead and I'm part of a great army of about 4,000 SEs, EMC SEs in the field. My night job is to try to help drive the venture funding and M&A machinery of the companies, the collective companies, and try to bring our federation strategy together.
I was hoping for you to say you were a ninja, but that's a shame.
A wicked ass ninja.
He's Daredevil. That's who he is.
So my name is Duncan Epping. I'm a chief technologist working for the Storage and Availability BU. Sometimes also referred to as my job role as a chief realist, because I bring reality back to the engineering teams. So I take a lot of your feedback, provide it to the engineering teams, and I want to make sure that we make our products better. Besides that, I have a blog called yellowbricks.com, and you can also find me on Twitter, DuncanYB.
You know what I should have said? I should have said, I am Iron Man. He's
You
my
have to have
hero.
a Big Mac or whatever that was.
All right. So four great panelists. The one thing I will say is, industry experts, industry titans, but still extremely humble, and we love, collectively we love talking to customers, meeting new people, hearing about stories of challenges, pros, cons, good, bad. So even outside of this forum, if you see one of us walking around, feel free to just come up, say hi, introduce yourself, and start talking to us, right? Also, keep the conversation going after VMworld. Feel free to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, MySpace, whatever your poison.
MySpace.
GeoCity.
Come on, GeoCities. and just keep the conversation going until next year. So with that, part of the rules, there really are no rules. It's all about having fun. Most importantly, though, this session, and I say this every year, this session is very boring if it's not for you guys, right? So there's no set script, there's no set agenda. I honestly have no prepared questions. I have stuff I can ask off the cuff if needed, but I want the next 55 minutes to be for you guys. So we have, unfortunately, there's only one microphone set up in the audience, but we have one microphone directly in front of me. Feel free, please start forming a line. And this topic, this whole 55-minute session is about you asking questions and us formulating responses and having conversation about it. So as I continue to ramble, please start, don't be shy. There has to be a first one. So
We're very friendly.
Come on
up. Hey, we have our first volunteer.
Perfect, first volunteer.
Woo!
Absolutely.
So again, anything goes. I'm going to try and limit responses to about 60 seconds per panelist, just to keep a flow going. We'll be interactive, ask questions, and most importantly, just have some fun. So with that, we'll turn it over.
In the spirit of fun, this is an easy and fun question, and I know a lot of you have home labs. What do you all have in your home lab now?
This is a question that, for me personally, has morphed a huge amount. So my first home lab was 3 ESX hosts homebrewed on a, on a bunch of mini machines that I would build myself. And then at its peak, I had 32 ESX hosts and 300 terabytes of storage. It's now actually shrunk again. It's now actually just 3 vSphere hosts that I build every Christmas because that's how I kind of regain my mojo. It makes me happy. But to tell you the truth, I use it almost never. My home lab is almost completely now Pivotal Web Services, AWS, vCloud Air, and I'm finding that the stuff I'm trying to push myself to learn more and more is more in the development space, which is an uncomfortable spot for me. So I'm trying to learn more in that space.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds similar. I mean, I never had 32 6i hosts. I have probably 5 or so. I'm kind of a storage junkie, though. I have a lot of storage. But to be honest, my lab's always maintained by power, heat, and Wi-Fi aggro.
Yep.
So it's basically on a baker's rack made of Supermicro stuff. But similar vein, a lot of the vSphere services that I use in my lab is there just to play with other applications, CoreOS, things like that. The actual time spent on just raw VMware stuff has decreased pretty significantly because the product's pretty tight. There's not a lot to really explore anymore. It's all pretty solid to work with, well documented. Now it's what do you do with the platform beyond it?
Duncan?
Yeah, I think the same applies to me. When I started out, I actually had 4 hosts, which Chad donated to me, which was awesome. And he actually wanted to send me a VNXE, I think the 5000 series or something like that, but my wife didn't agree with that either. So I had all of that equipment sent to Cork, where we have a large support center, and I actually host all of my equipment out of Cork right now. We're talking in this case about 16 servers, probably a couple of hundred terabytes of storage. So I have anything ranging from VNix to NetApp, Isilon, 3PAR, of course, a lot of vSAN at the moment. But actually the majority of time that I spend, I don't spend my time in the lab on that equipment. I actually spend my time in the engineering lab, which is an engineering cloud called Nimbus internally, because it's really easy for us to spin up new builds, and I can easily test out new functionality, new builds, new versions of vCenter server, and you name it. So that's where I spend the majority of my time.
Yeah, well, as the kind of key networking guy here, my lab is primarily networking centric. So I have some hosts and I have a storage array, but the network is actually a 40 gig backbone with some 10 gig split offs. Yeah, it's 40 gig in my house. I know, it's crazy. Look, I'm like at the height of the networking side where he was with his 300 terabytes of storage. I mean, he had multiple VMAXs in his basement, so come on, right? It's one switch for 40 gig ports. So 40 gig switch, hooking up the hosts, breaking out into some 10 gig, and then some 1 gig and other stuff, and then playing with a variety of network technologies. Obviously, we kind of just layer NSX on top of all of that, so I can do some testing and such.
How does it do with Netflix?
Well, the constraint, as always, is the outbound connection. The 20 meg that I'm getting from CenturyLink or whatever, right?
So a funny story. At its peak, my home lab, when it was all fired up, generated so much heat that I needed to cut a hole in the house because I live in Toronto, and during the winter time, during the winter time, it would generate enough heat to heat the whole basement, no problem. And I had to bring in the electrician in to pull in a bunch of 30 amp circuits. He's like, what the hell are you doing in here? I keep waiting. Like the joke in the neighborhood was like, Chad's got to grow up. You're right. But the other thing that I would point out that I think not enough people take advantage of is the hands-on labs online are really, really, really good now, right? And anyone who's an EMC customer or partner, we've got this thing called vLab, which is a massive, on 3 continents, vSphere powered IaaS platform where you can get anything on demand, so including hardware and all that sort of jazz. I think the era of the home lab is kind of in decline a bit.
And the great thing about the hands-on labs as well, especially for people who are not really networking savvy like myself, it allows you to go through these NSX exercises. It has a full lab manual without actually understanding, what you're doing in my case. So it's, it's kind of cool.
So one of the best stories I heard about Chad was part of your key employee agreement when you first started EMC was that your electric bill was so high that you forced EMC to pay for it, right? They're pretty happy that you probably turned off some stuff, right?
Yeah, totally.
So for me, to kind of wrap up the question, I've never been a huge fan of a lot of lab equipment at home because I like to have a good work-life balance. So the less techie stuff I have at home, the more inclined I am to just completely disconnect on weekends and whatnot. But with that said, I made sure I have a I was big in having powerful desktops and using Workstation to load up multiple ESX boxes and whatnot, and still geek out when I need to. But with the increase in what's available in the cloud, home labs are almost not needed because I can go to AWS, I can go to Pivotal IO for DevOps stuff, and to throw out a little plug because they do help out the vExperts tremendously. There's a great service out there called Revelo Systems.
Yep.
And if you need that bare metal feel, if you need to deploy a bare metal ESX box, they actually created a system you can deploy ESX on top of AWS. And it's really cheap. But actually, I figured out the costs that it's cheaper for me to use that when I need to than to have my own setup at home, right? So for those of you interested, not a plug for them at all, but it's a great service and concept called Revelo Systems.
Yep. All right, next.
All right, so there have been a lot of really cool announcements, a lot of incremental, a lot of reveals. What do you guys think is the coolest, the most transformative, the neatest thing so far? I don't know if there's going to be more stuff tomorrow, but what do you guys feel is, to me, what's the thing that's going to change what we do and how we do it going forward?
For me, this is a black and white one, and it was a real bummer to see people walking out during the Monday keynote when this happened, because to me this was a huge move strategically, so putting on my executive hat, and technically, to have VMware reveal their greenfield cloud-native IaaS strategy, right? So the Photon platform, it's going to take time to mature and get out there, but if you think about it, it represents a major strategic shift. Historically, VMware would always say it's vSphere, it begins and ends on ESX and vCenter, and that's awesome, period. And that's actually still the majority of how people deploy these new cloud-native apps, and that's why Bonneville VMware integrated containers are great, and VIO is great, but it's very important for VMware to continue to adapt and evolve as a company and acknowledge that there's other ecosystems that are emerging and support them in this kind of two-mode way, right? And I think there's probably some people who feel like they're betraying their legacy. No, they're actually honoring the legacy of innovating and disrupting, themselves. I thought it was a huge deal, personally.
I'd actually have to agree with Chad. I mean, what VMware's trying to do with Photon Controller, Photon Machine, Photon OS, all together being Photon Platform, is really creating a new legacy for VMware. Disrupting the market in the same way that we did when we introduced the hypervisor. So that's really, really exciting, and a lot of the other stuff in the Cloud Native Apps team is great, but it's also, I think those are probably the most exciting, but also equally important are all the incremental, and I say incremental as if they're somehow not important, but they are, the incremental delivery of good, solid, releases for vSAN, for NSX, for all of that. I mean, it's good stuff, and I know that Duncan's probably super jazzed about this.
Yeah, I actually didn't want to mention vSAN, but I will.
Okay, I took care of it for you.
No, I mean, for me personally, I think vSAN 6.1 is a big thing. Stretch clustering, 2-node robo solution, very huge. I was just in a session where we actually demonstrated a couple of new technologies that are coming up, which will be layered on top of vSAN. One of them being a distributed file system, and one of the demos that they had, I think this is going to be very relevant in the container space, but one of the demos that they had is they created a clone of a specific file, so they created 2,000 clones in under a second. So you can imagine that if you have a big DevOps environment, a lot of developers, and you now need to start doing these unit tests, for instance, you need to start testing your environment, you can easily spin out as many containers as you want, literally within a matter of seconds. And I was really surprised about that piece of technology, and it kind of shows you, which direction VMware is heading into. Both vSAN, but also the new layers that will be added on top of it.
I kind of expected Scott to talk a little bit about NSX, but maybe because the announcement for 6.2 was last week, that doesn't technically qualify, but I've spent a lot of time with VMware NSX. The 6.2 release includes a lot of things that I've really been looking forward to, getting that logical layer kind of stretched across vCenter environments. So for me, that was pretty huge, but more towards announcements that came out. I like the idea behind the validated design announcement. Competitors, Cisco Validated Designs as an example, have been around for a very long period of time, and they help kind of stamp out a platform that channel members and end users like yourselves can consume, right? It kind of gives you that, I'm not going to say best practice, but recommended practice. You can help.
There you go.
You can help get in the minds of other people that are designing large or medium scale vSphere environments. So I like seeing something coming from VMware and the ecosystem saying, this is kind of how we intend the product to be used. These are some recommended practices to scale out, in kind of a linear fashion, and we're kind of putting our stamp of approval on it as well. I'm interested to see how that's going to affect or tingle around with the VCDX program too.
And I think to add to that, I think one thing you mentioned, the ecosystem. If you look at all the announcements by VMware itself, there are also many announcements from the ecosystem, so all of our partners. If you look at companies like, for instance, ZeroStack, Chris works for Rubrik, an awesome platform. It's innovating in the backup and recovery space, but on top of that also providing a secondary storage platform. There's also other companies in that space like Cohesity, so there's many new startups coming out around VMworld that have really interesting offerings and actually are changing the industry, if you ask me.
I couldn't believe that they actually call it 6.2. Like, there was a lot in that release.
Yeah. I mean, it was a pretty significant release with multi-VC and universal objects and all that kind of stuff, but there's more in the works yet, and I guess they felt that,
Wink, wink, nudge,
yeah,
nudge.
wink, wink, nod, nod. Go look at 6639S. Do you have an idea what we're talking about? So.
That seemed like a good idea for semantic versioning. If you made a 7 or something, then API compatibility wouldn't be.
I think when you're using semantic language for product numbering, you're forgetting that product marketing people come up with the names.
I hope they follow it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, all right.
I think to kind of close out the topic again, the innovation that's happening in the entire SDDC SAC, right, is amazing and great. For me personally, I think I'm, not that Chad's my boss and I'm, following his direction, but the whole thing about, cloud native is super exciting. And for me, it's kind of thinking back to like the 2000 to 2002 timeframe when I started talking and pushing just virtualization in general, and everyone was looking at me like, you're crazy, that's never going to go, it's not going to go anywhere. And look where it's at now. I think we're right at the ground floor of that evolutionary cycle now with cloud native, where the early adopters, the early evangelists are going to be the next people on the panelist floor in the next 5 to 10 years, right?
Sure.
Okay. I know you guys can't predict the future, but there's been a lot of cloud native, NSX this year, lots of improvements in those areas, but the one key highlight for me was seeing Sanjay and the Microsoft person on stage, and that was a first for me. What does 2016 hold? What can we see more from the likes of VMware, EMC, etc. with partners? Do we see more relationships to create synergy, to drive solutions and make them simpler for end users?
I think someone made the joke yesterday that next year we'll have Oracle up on stage explaining licensing to you guys, so that's my goal.
Again, just there's a human element to watching, the change that's happening in Microsoft, how quickly their culture is changing. The fact that they are embracing a non-monolithic kind of view of the world was a precursor to that being able to happen, which I think, frankly, good on them for their strategic shift and change. If I was a predictor of the future, I think the area where we need to go faster is actually in the as-a-service packaging of a lot of the stuff that we do. So I think, you know, we need to go faster with vCloud Air. We need to go faster with VirtuStream. We need to go faster down that path. Otherwise, I think we're going to be missing a critical way of how customers want to consume the tech.
I'll pivot that a little bit, not what you said, but the question. I mean, the vendor's going to do what the vendor's going to do. I think what's more important is, regardless of kind of how things shake out, it's become very, very clear to me that as engineers and architects, as admins, we've got to learn new skills around automation, writing code, how to script, you know, PowerShell, JavaScript, you know, whatever your Python, whatever it may be. This is the time now, you know, as soon as possible, to get on Pluralsight or Codecademy or, you know, Code School, whatever it is. Start learning Ruby, Python, JavaScript, whatever
Go.
it may be.
Yeah.
Get those skills honed, because the demand is just, it's getting larger and larger every day. And right now you've got that kind of grace period, but no matter whose crystal ball you're going to look at, those skills are going to be what the next generation of IT is looking for.
Totally.
I would agree with one refinement. I think that that for most of the people in this room who are now, when you would consider yourselves VMware admins or you know, sysadmins or something of that nature, a lot of the stuff that you're doing is manual. You know, you're setting up servers, you're doing that, and really we need to move into automation and orchestration. And so I think that systems that do that, whether it be, you know, VRA or OpenStack or Kubernetes or Mesos or others, where a lot of this stuff is happening for us, and we are more declaratively describing what we want implemented in that infrastructure, is really where probably most of us need to go. Now, I think that will include some level of programming and scripting. I'm not wholeheartedly into the everyone must be a programmer mantra, which I think is kind of, people beat it a little too much, but at the same time, there's certainly nothing wrong with Chris' advice. I mean, you're going to need to have some familiarity with some of these languages, because they're going to be very, very useful in getting you where you need to go with this scripting and automation orchestration thing. And I think orchestration and automation really are the key areas where we as individuals need to focus. And I think I have my, you know, kind of thoughts on where I hope the company will go, but obviously that's above my pay grade. But I hope that you'll see similar sort of things around lots of pieces in that space.
So that it brings up a good question that I have. And, you know, Chad, you mentioned, I mentioned that this whole cloud native thing is very exciting and at the very, you know, bottom of the cusp. But one conversation that I have with my colleagues and whatnot is, yeah, we're pushing that bar, right? We're trying to, you know, be the early adopters, the early evangelists of the cloud native thing. But we honestly don't even know if that's going to pick up off the ground.
Who cares though, man? Like, I gotta tell you, like in the, no, I'm not trying to be a jerk about this. What I mean by that is, literally, I remember my first VMworld, and I remember the first time I visited a customer, and I was like, yeah, this virtualization thing, like you said it yourself, in the early days, you were the heretic. You had no idea, you know, whether you were right or wrong, but you were passionate, you believed in it, and you did it because you were curious, right? All of those things say to me that this is an analogous journey that is starting now.
But I would actually contend that the question of whether or not it's going to take off has already been answered.
Yeah.
We've refused to see the answer. The answer is a $6 billion Amazon Web Services business, right? Cloud native is already here. The question is whether we as a VMware community are prepared to accept it and adapt what we do and how we build our applications and how we orchestrate our infrastructure.
I guess the key thing here is how you build your application. I'm assuming that for the majority of people in the audience, they don't have a large set of developers sitting in their offices. So that's the key thing. So that's also where the perception comes from. That's the challenging part.
So here's guys. So while I'm a deep nerd, I am an exec at one of the companies that we're here, right? So very often I'm meeting with the CEO or the CIO at the customers that we're talking to, and sometimes I'm meeting with the storage team or the VMware admin team. We met with one customer who I won't name that's actually here in the room this morning. That, you know, we know the brand. Somewhere inside almost every company, maybe the infrastructure team doesn't see it, but somebody is trying to figure out how do I make this work? How do I adapt my own app team?
But again, that depends on the size of the company. If you're primarily talking to enterprise companies, or larger companies, even enterprises, an enterprise in Europe is different than an enterprise in the US.
I know, man.
In your case, you may be talking about 5,000, 6,000 hosts. We are talking about 50 or 100 hosts. So there's a huge difference in terms of how you get applications delivered and how you consume them, and how, in the end, how you automate things around that. So it's a completely different.
Respectfully, I cover all three of the theaters, so I see, I'm going to be in EMEA for the next 2 weeks, and I see small customers and big customers. This cloud-native app thing doesn't correlate with size. It doesn't, right? Like there's big customers that are way back in the, we experience are the customers that we talk to.
So the comment about AWS and the $6 bazillion, opportunity. I don't know the exact distribution of how that is laid out in terms of their service, but it would be my assumption that those are primarily like EC2 instances, not Elastic Beanstalk and all the cloud native type stuff, right?
So you can actually pull out some stuff. It's actually relatively surprising. A huge chunk, almost 40%, is actually S3, right? Mm-hmm. And then the rest is almost all EC2.
A lot of cat pictures.
Yeah, a lot of cat pictures. A lot of cat pictures. But the point is that if you double click on what people are using those EC2 instances for, they're not using Elastic Beanstalk for the most part, but they're using it for declarative and durable apps that are written using this 12-factor,
I mean, they may not be consuming all of the additional services, and that's fine, but the fact is that they are consuming those services and consuming the services in increasing volumes, and that is indicative of a trend that we can't just say, well, I don't know if it's going to take off or not. I mean, I think it's already taken off. But the question is, how do we adapt our environments and our own careers and our own organizations to accommodate that?
Now, here's the thing that humans struggle with: two ideas in their brain that are conflicting, and to maintain both truths in their brain at one moment. That 6 billion is growing freaking fast. It's like 60% CAGR year-over-year growth, and on a big number. And Azure is about the same size, a little bit smaller. Remember that that's in the context or against the backdrop of a $120 trillion IT market as a whole, right? Now that market, by the way, is not growing fast. It's pretty flat, right? Both of those are simultaneously true, right? That people are coming all different shapes and sizes, businesses do, but I think your meta point of trying to debate that it's happening is delusional.
Good.
That'll be on your annual review. Delusional.
Yeah, I said earlier that I'm fully on board, man. Come on.
Hi, gents. In the pursuit of keeping things light and fun, but staying within the context of IT and data center, I'm interested to know what your superhero or supervillain alter ego would be within, and what your superpower would be as well.
Oh, so
Here you go.
So I think this person, so my superhero is Tony Stark, right? That's who I would want to be. Now the real world Tony Stark that he's modeled on is Elon Musk, and I love what Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX really? and Tesla and solar cities. It's incredible stuff, right? Apparently he's a maniac to work with, but you got to admire the output. Right. My super villain, not me, but who I view as a super villain is Larry Ellison. I'm like, whatever, I'm like, am I trying to convince our marketing team that we should sponsor the Kiwi team for the next America's Cup? Like, we'll end up with like a tiny little logo because those boats cost like a truckload of money. That's awesome. Yeah,
I made him lose trains of thought.
Yeah, no. I'm like, maybe we could give them some big data analytics on the boats or whatever, but like, I detest the way Oracle operates. I respect them as a competitor, but a lot of that originates with Larry.
I'll go last. Go ahead, guys.
Okay. Okay, so I'm actually not like a big superhero kind of person, but so maybe there's a persona that fits, but My idea of who I want to be is the superhero that's out there working every day just to make it a little better, even though you aren't necessarily making a huge difference every day. I don't know. Maybe you consider that Batman. I don't know. I mean, I'm not filthy, stinking rich like Bruce Wayne, but you know, just somebody out there is plugging away every day, trying to make a difference. Maybe in the end we'll end up changing the world, but is doing that, you know, one life, one incident, one thing at a time.
That's noble.
So, I'm not trying to be noble. That's just, you're right. As far as the villain goes, yeah, I don't really know. Sorry. Yeah.
He's not capable
Some evil
of being
hacker.
evil.
Yeah, you know.
Hop on the Larry bandwagon, come on. Down with Oracle.
That's all right. Yeah, it's all good. So,
Yeah, I'm not going to make an Oracle joke again, right? So, but, I mean, for me, it's always has been clear. I've always wanted to be Chad Sakac when I grew up. So, awesome guy. In all seriousness, it's not a joke. I mean, if you look at the guy's stage presence, that's something. You know, I really admire. No, I'm not kidding.
Yeah, how long ago were you a commercial SE?
8 years ago,
And what are you now?
an SE.
In all honesty, like Duncan, what you just said, that your story is
That's not just a story, but
amazing.
for me personally, if you look at how comfortable he is up on stage and how he presents things in a really easy way and explains these stories.
and that's why he's
No, that's what I mean. That's what I enjoy watching as well. For me, this is one of the sessions where I actually get to see him speak, because normally I'm doing customer meetings and doing my own sessions. So this is always awesome sitting next to him.
do you feel the Chad love?
Yep.
I love you. I love you. Oh, you know, I'm gonna cry.
Starting to cry now.
You know what the trick is? It's to not think about what you're gonna say.
Maybe easier for you than it is for me. Come on.
I bet your legal department loves hearing you say that.
Oh my! So there was one time where I got called into the office of our chief counsel, and at the end of the meeting, he had me in a ball crying in the corner.
By the way, talking about not thinking, Chris.
I have no comeback. I'm a fan of the Lone Ranger. Probably my superhero would be a little more cowboy-esque. I'm the Converge Cowboy as my alter ego, but I like to write PowerShell modules and give those to people and contribute to open source. So that's kind of my positive side. I guess my evil side would be destroying manual processes guy.
Strangest supervillain ever.
And I'm allergic to marketing. That's my kryptonite as a Superman type thing.
Oh, that is good.
There you go.
That is good.
Good job. Yeah. All right. Does that help at all?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
It does. I'm gonna get something
Yeah,
Sure.
totally.
Yeah, sure. Right. All right. Thanks. All right.
That is a first.
There you go.
How awesome is that?
Okay. Next.
So my question's
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Rick?
I'm good.
Okay. Never mind. Go ahead.
so my question's kind of around blogging itself. You know, I read blogs of like you guys and like William, and it's like some really high-end awesome stuff. I'm like, oh, I wish I could do that or write about that or have that technical knowledge. And I ended up writing articles, and then I have people come up to me saying, oh, this was really helpful for me, blah, 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 blah. So multi-point question is, how do you pick what you're going to write about as far as technical? Like, does it seem mundane to you because you do it all the time, but it seemed awesome to me? And what would be your most unexpectedly, not popular, but article that people come up to you and they're like, that you thought that was like just something you did, but made a lot of impact on people?
William's right over there, by the way, just in case you want to meet him. Yeah.
William's awesome.
Yeah, he is.
Blogs are
That's right.
killer.
See, like we all are like, you know, like you're like, oh, bloggers, and we're like, oh, William.
William.
Feel the William love?
He's blushing.
I basically write what I'm doing that particular moment. So it's just like, it's on extra task. It's just part of the life, you know, for me. This is going to sound weird, and I don't mean to offend anybody. So I'm the exec sponsor at EMC for the LGBT community within the company, right? And I posted a blog, like the most popular blog post I ever did was the multi-vendor one on NFS behaviors and then one on queuing and blah, 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 blah. But I wrote one, which all it was a mirror of our internal, you know, memo about Pride Month. And it didn't say like, go gays or lesbians. It said like, celebrate the diversity that's in all of us. Like it was so tame, right? And I gotta tell, if you go back and you take a look, because it's still public, the fury that I got, like visceral hatred, frankly, I was really caught off guard. I did not expect that.
Yeah, I guess that's the fun thing about blogging as well. You never know what to expect in terms of how an article is going to be received. I think in my case, I wrote many articles from a technical perspective that were well received and a lot of comments on, but I think there were a couple that stood out to me which were non-technical at all. So there's one about public speaking. I had many responses on that one, and there's one about career development, guidance, mentoring, those types of things. And I had a huge response to those as well. I never expected that, to be honest, because it's something that I just wrote up in literally a couple of minutes, and you figure you just throw it out there and see what happens, and then all of a sudden it just completely blows up. So it's something that you don't expect, don't see coming, and it just takes a direction unexpectedly.
The thing is, like, you can't separate like your life and your work. They're all munged up together, right?
Yeah, okay, so I'll go a little different direction. The other part of your question was about choosing content, knowing what to write about. I try to pick things that I don't know a lot about to write about, just because
that's cool.
Going through the process of learning is really the fun part about writing for me. So by the end of the article, I'm pretty educated on it, and I'm fully aware that in many of them I've been wrong, and people have pointed it out, and I have to fix that. But it's almost like a learning journey that I write about, and then I crowdsource what I'm wrong about.
Yeah.
And at that point, it keeps it fun and fresh, and I try to never put myself in a corner where I have to write about one thing. And Scott's going to talk, but I think he's probably the master of diversity among content, but I never want to be known as just writing about one thing. So that's the two-part answer for that.
That's cool.
Thank you for that. But I would say that lots of others do that really, really well. So I think when I look at, kind of the content, I mean, you could kind of look at the content over the course of the last 10 years that I've been writing, and you'll see shifts in my career, like when I moved from being an Active Directory guy to being a VMware guy, and then now to being more of this open source, networking type dude, right? And so naturally what you're writing reflects what you're working on. For me, writing is kind of the final part of a learning process. So I will go off and do something that I need to do for work or because it interests me, and I have some spare cycles. And I'll do that, and then the process of kind of cementing that, or at least somewhat setting it in firmament for my own, edification, is writing about it. And if I can't write about it and I can't get it out and explain it, sometimes just the process of trying to, I have blog posts about topics that I've tried to write. I'm like, it's not all the way there yet because I can't explain it simply enough that somebody can read it and it be consumable, and that means I haven't mastered it all the way yet. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of it's almost like a check for me. Like if I can write about it and I can explain it and tell somebody else how to replicate that, then I know, okay, I've got it at a reasonable depth. I'm good. I can move on, build from it, go on to the next thing that might be related. But if I get stuck somewhere along the way, then it's like, okay, that's the area where I need to revisit and see what's wrong there. So,
Thanks.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, what tools are you guys all using to write posts and whatnot?
I use Mars Edit.
Evernote, WordPress.
I just write directly into WordPress.
So directly into the WordPress?
Yeah, directly into WordPress.
And you use it for you keep drafts as you're working on stuff within WordPress?
Just write it and publish it straight away. Yeah. Don't even think about it.
See, there you're
I don't do any scheduling, just keep on cranking those blog posts out.
That's that, don't think about it, be extemporaneous.
Yeah. If someone doesn't agree, they will phone you up.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
And
I've only ever had to pull one blog post, by the way.
did legal ask
we can't tell you because
No, I'll tell you. So basically, any EMC customers in the audience? So we do ETAs, like EMC Technical Advisory, meaning, bug, watch out, that sort of thing, right? So an ETA crosses my desk, and it's an Avamar bug, and the Avamar bug is really bad, right? Like it's, if you do this, 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 and this, you will corrupt the entire Avamar backup set.
Oops.
Right? And it had a really easy This is, all you need to do to find out if this affects you is this one little thing, easy.
Chris would like to know more about
Yeah,
And-
like you're sitting next to a competitor. Come on, guys.
No, put it this way, anyone...
All software has
yeah,
bugs.
All software has bugs,
Amen,
right?
yeah,
So, and then it had a really easy fix. So I'm like, well, some people don't read ETAs. I'm going to do a blog post on it. So I do the blog post. Within minutes, the product manager is calling me, freaking out. And I'm like, screw you, buddy. I'm thinking about the customer and, you know, it's right. Don't. And then a few minutes later, another product up a notch goes, Symantec is now crapping all over your blog post and we're seeing it, blah, 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 right? And I'm like, look, don't worry about it, man. Like, if you're transparent and you're honest, everyone has bugs. It's better to be open, right? Boom, boom. And I'm giving the, you know, the Heisman to all these product teams coming at me. I get a phone call from Pat Gelsinger. And at the time, Pat was running the product team within EMC, and he goes, hey, Chad. And I'm like, hey, Pat. And he goes, so this blog. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so why are you ignoring all the people coming at you and telling you should take it down? And I'm like, well, Pat, I think we should think about the customer first and blah, 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 blah. And he goes, let me tell you a story. I was the guy who was responsible for that Pentium bug. You remember that Pentium bug, Chad? Mm-hmm. The floating point, you know, bug. You know that recall cost Intel like $3 billion. Do you know how many customers were affected by that bug? 2. And I'm like, where are you going here, Pat? And he goes, the issue was that the bug was so easy to repro, right? You could just, there was, you know, stuff on the internet immediately that basically said, go into Excel, put in this value, divide this by this, and you'll see that it generates an obviously wrong answer. The process of the recall actually damaged a whole bunch of customers through that process. And I'm like, okay, not getting his metaphor. And he then goes, Chad, do you know how many customers are affected by this Avamar bug that you pointed out? I'm like, I don't know. And he goes, well, we do. It's 0.03% of the install base. Do you know what's happening now? Everybody is looking for the fix. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, do you think the fix went through the same engineering due diligence that we put into the major releases of the product? And I'm like, I don't know. And then he's like, do you think you might, in the spite of the fact you think you're helping the customers, might actually be inadvertently harming them? Because now we have thousands of customers asking for this not validated hot fix to be mass rolled out to them. And I'm like, I'm sorry, Pat. And he goes, what do you think you should do? And I'm like, I think I should pull down the blog post, Pat. So that's the only one I've ever retracted.
Wow. All right.
Interesting.
Yeah, good story.
Crazy.
So beyond the new features and products that have been announced at this VMworld and all the new platforms like Photon and things, a lot of the other focus has been around things like VVRDs and policy-driven everything. You know, a lot of talk with NSX, of course, has been about how stop managing at the router or firewall level, manage the policies that set them up. And there's been a lot of sessions about stop managing the data center at the cluster or the host or the node level, manage how it ought to look. What do you think that realistically looks like? What is the realistic path from where we are today to getting to a point where instead of provisioning, we're creating policies that do the provisioning based on standards that we can set? And how does that integrate directly into the technology and go from being an idea on paper to something that's actually baked into the product and the solutions?
So, looking ahead, and I'll speak more about kind of, you know, where things are going to be rather than where they are right now, because there's a lot of work going on around policy, but it's a little disjointed, to be honest, right? I mean, you know, there's no way today to write a policy that would say, as far as I'm aware, and I could be wrong, you know, to say this is the kind of storage and the kind of network connectivity and this and that and that and that and have it all wrapped up. I mean, we've been talking about the barcode on the VM for, you know, years, but we haven't quite gotten there. But I think where the industry is headed, it's kind of two things coming together. One, infrastructure orchestration is just something that has to happen. Like, we can't keep pushing off infrastructure orchestration. We have to do it, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense. We're just kicking the can down the road. little bit longer, delaying the inevitable, sooner or later, we've got to do it. But at the same time, that infrastructure orchestration doesn't address the needs of the applications that are coming out from this right. So I think you're actually going to see kind of this coming from two different directions together, meeting at some point in the middle of things like Kubernetes and its ilk, where you define what the attributes of an application are in a declarative way, and then infrastructure orchestration systems that can then be consumed by those applications so that you're describing what you want your data center to do, what applications it needs to run, and then it is going and consuming the resources, whether those be on-premises resources or whether those be off-premises resources, to get the job done, right? Now, there's a lot of magic that has to happen in there in terms of, networking, storage, replication, lots of details that the industry still has to work out. But I think that's ultimately where you're headed. And if the company does it right, then that's where all these efforts, products, features, things are going to be headed in that direction, kind of to make that vision become reality. That's my take anyway.
I would contribute that, to me, the future is more about how we classify our applications and our data. If we look at how the data centers run today, we have things like tags and folders and other objects that can be used to logically define what we're trying to do. But at the end of, kind of at the beginning of it all, there's still a human making those definitions. So until we have systems that are able to, programmatically define, this is an application server that is doing this particular intent, and I know that without any human having to tell me that the application is doing these certain things. I don't need to have a human tagging them per se. We're still going to struggle to scale to that dream of the software-defined data center. Because in my mind, the actual policies and what they should do when they're relayed onto something is relatively trivial compared to how do I get a computer, which is pretty horrible at doing classification, to understand my intent.
So all cloud-native app models do have some declarative YAML-like thing that is used to describe the parameters. But this comes to Scott's point of going, this is not going to magically happen infrastructure layer up solo. It's the app world moving forward and being more declarative, and the infrastructure being more elastic, and then being able to read some sort of cluster manager, container managers, declaration of what's needed. We're going to, by the way, that will happen at the same time as incremental steps for the classic world of applications that depend on rich infrastructure resiliency, right? So with each passing vRealize release, we then package up a bunch of stuff that adds extra policies around backup and DR and blah, blah, blah. And we will get incrementally better down that path, but we will never get to the nirvana. I'm with Scott, and actually, I think the points are actually pretty close. I'm with both of them on that front. But we're going to keep making small steps forward on the networking domain, the storage domain, and the compute domain.
Yeah, and I would say that a lot of these small steps have already been taken. If you look at storage, you look at networking, but for instance, what Rubrik is doing in the backup and recovery space, which is also all around defining policies and assigning those to virtual machines and then having them being backed up an X number of times, you name it. I think those are the steps that we have been taking the last couple of years. Now we need to start combining these different things. Now, if you look at VMware, for instance, there is a couple of initiatives going on. I can't say too much about it, but for instance, we're starting to use things like machine learning to figure out what kind of characteristics a specific application has, and then start defining those policies and modifying the policies based on what we've learned over the course of the next amount of time. Those are things that actually are going on, for instance, within the Office of CTO, within the storage availability BU, in our core BU, but also within the network and security space.
That sounds really good for brownfield, because I'm thinking, who's going to take the time to go back and tag policy to 9,000 virtual machines? You're just going to, move forward with the new stuff and let the old stuff kind of age out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I've always been a believer in the saying that if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. So what would your advice, either from your own experience or just in general, would you give us? How do you constantly become better? Because obviously you've achieved a pretty high level of notoriety in the VMware world. And
So I have just a very basic thing, which is like my North Star on a personal level, which is that feeling in your gut you have when you're doing something that scares you, fear. It's an indicator that you're going someplace good, right? So if you're not feeling that fear, it's that's something to be a little worried about, right? So, and when you do feel that fear, go, I'm going to run towards that thing. I've met some Aussies that I told them that, and they're like, Chad, you know that there are animals in our country that if you do that, they will kill you.
Drop bears.
So I've said, okay, I'll modify that. Run towards your fear with a pointy stick, right? The other thing that I would just say that is just be authentic, be you. You know, I think what people underestimate is that in the modern world, being authentic actually makes you in some way unassailable. People know that they can't, you know, bork with you, they can't mess with you, they can't politically maneuver you, you're honest, you're you, right? So that would be my two piece of things. Run towards your fear, be authentic.
And I think it's definitely great advice if I look at myself. You know, placing yourself in uncomfortable positions is really, really painful, but it's something you will need to do to move forward. For me personally, that has always been public speaking. So I was terrified of public speaking 6 or 7 years ago. I did my first session at VMworld in front of 700 people. Probably the worst experience ever, but it's something that you need to do at some point in time to start moving forward. The other thing that also allows me to move ahead is basically talking to customers and just trying to figure out, you know, what kind of challenges you are facing and bring that back. And I'm not afraid to speak up, and I think that's one of the characteristics that you will need as well. If you want to grow to a certain level, you need to be, you know, capable of explaining what some of the challenges are within an organization, with the product, or, you know, anything that has something to do with that space.
I guess I'll keep just two short pieces of advice because I think Chad's spot on the fear thing. I definitely use that as my compass as well. Keep in mind that everything you want to learn, someone else didn't know before they learned it as well. So sometimes it can seem overwhelming, like everyone knows how to do Kubernetes and I don't. And they all didn't know how to do it either at some point. So it's totally learnable. And then B, yeah, there's a little bit of a peanut gallery over here. B, everything you know, you also did not know at some point as well. So it's important, I think, to take a moment, take a breather out once in a while, look backwards to give yourself that kind of boost to say, man, you know, 10, 15, 20, whatever, however long you've been in IT, I didn't know even how to log into a server, and now I can build one from scratch. And give yourself that pat on the back once in a while, and then go back to Chad's advice and say, all right, what's the next thing I want to add to my list?
Stick.
Yeah, there you go.
I completely agree with almost everything that's been said. The one thing I would say is that there have been some things that gave me that fear in my gut that I wouldn't run toward, and like that taxi in Bangkok. But
It could have been an exciting night.
so you know. But that being said, you have to be willing to step outside your comfort zone. And I think that's the summary of what we've all been saying is that you just have to step outside your comfort zone. That the only way you will get better is to grow. The only way you grow is to move beyond what you know. And moving beyond what you know is inherently uncomfortable. So don't be afraid to embrace that discomfort. And you can look to, you know, I made a mention, I was on the Geek Whisperers podcast this morning with John and Amy and Matt, and inadvertently came up with this great thing, and they're like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing ever, right? But don't be afraid to leverage the power of your personal network. Like, there's a fantastic community here. Don't underestimate the power of your personal network, so reach out to others. And I know, like, people in spaces, to Chris's point, they were there once, right? If you approach them in a, you know, not in a, hey, help me this, but I mean, like, hey, can you know, is there some way you can help me out? Almost invariably, they will say, yeah, go look at this, go look at this, go look at this, here are some resources. And then, you know, as long as they see that you're willing to put forth the effort and you're not looking for somebody to do your work for you, they're going to help, right? So,
yeah. One thing that I was told and taught very, very, very early on in my career that I kind of stuck with me and I ran with it, and it's been very successful, is if you're in an organization where you're too afraid to push the bar or barrier, or you're afraid that they'll say no, or they did say no, you're probably working for the wrong company, right? You can only grow by doing, right? If you're being held back, all you're doing is hurting yourself. So, like, yeah, early on in my career, I worked for an organization where I wanted to do new, exciting things, and it was, there was that perfect movie that had the perfect example. I can't think of the movie it was, but I was always the one told that you know, this is how things have always been done around here.
Yeah.
And what you want to do is completely against our history and mantra. And I was like, okay, well, nice knowing you.
Yeah.
Right?
Peace out.
And because all that's going to do is just hold yourself back, right? So don't be afraid to push the bar. And with that said, hopefully I don't want to see a huge flux of new people in the job market now. Like you're going to get home, you're like, I quit. But
About 6
so don't
people
do
now
that.
sending an email to the boss.
Screw you, buddy.
But that's helped me in my career. Right?
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have time for one more. I think we're at the bottom of the hour. So
I'll be brief then. So, open question. I need one of you guys to define irony for me.
Define irony.
Define irony, and I'll explain why in a second. So, we are at a technology conference. We happen to be talking to 4 plus 1 of the most influential technology bloggers in the industry. You guys are writers. You guys do fantastic writing. Whose job is it to proofread the slides?
Rick's.
no, I sent it to VMworld.
Somebody, anybody?
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Does anybody see what I'm talking about here? Capital T and Scott Lowe.
What? Scaffold.
Anybody?
Oh, nice.
So huge, like the teeth could not resist capitalizing itself.
That would be Jack Morton. Jack Morton, the company that puts on VMworld for VMware.
Who have
can
pulled
say-
together an amazing event,
Absolutely.
but screwed up the slide.
We're all imperfect humans. All right, thanks.
Do we have time for one more? Any other? I love the dialogue.
Yeah, here comes one. Come on.
Yeah.
Or here comes a couple guys. All right.
We'll do speed round, lightning round.
Speed round. Quick question.
30 seconds.
I started, I figured I'll finish it. I just want to say from, everybody here, we've all probably been to your blogs and we come up against a technological solution. Thank you for that very much. I know a number of times I've hit one of your blogs at one time or another and you saved my bacon.
Thank you, man.
How much response do you get back on an individual basis? I mean, how does that make you feel to know that you've really helped people out with their technical problems?
The coolest thing for me ever is when I visit a customer for the first time, and it's like we already know each other. And they're like, I use this, blah, 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 and I'm like, oh man, that's awesome.
Typically, that's also something that people tend to forget. The fact that they follow you on Twitter doesn't necessarily mean that I know immediately who you are. If you have more than, like Scott as well, you have 20,000 followers, it's difficult to recognize each individual over time, right? So make sure to introduce yourself as well when you have a chat. But I personally do appreciate it. I think that's why I enjoy VMworld that much, because you have people coming up thanking you for some articles or other things as well. I think that's really cool.
Totally.
I enjoy all comments and emails and respond because you're teaching me, and that's a lot of the value in writing and putting myself out there. So it's always great to hear back either things I messed up or things I did well.
Yeah, feedback is critically important. So, I can't speak for all of them. I think they're saying the same thing, but, hey, we love to keep the feedback coming. So comments, Twitter, emails, whatever. We love to hear from you
Care
guys.
packages filled with unmarked bills.
Yeah, that's fine too.
Amazon wish list.
By the way, I've always kind of been befuddled. Like occasionally you find someone, they're like, yeah, I read that, and there was either something I wanted to add or something I wanted to correct, but I didn't want to for it. And I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
All right.
all right, last one.
One quick one.
Real quick, first IT jobs for all you guys.
Help desk.
Novell 311 NDS, dude. Hey, that sucked.
Dude, it can get worse. Lotus Notes.
Oh!
Really?
Commercial installer of DSL service.
Ouch.
Help desk for me.
Help desk for you too. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Which actually I found extremely humbling, right? Like, so I worked for an ISP back when there was only dial-up, right? And then we were acquired by Earthlink. And working on help desk, helping 50 and 60-year-old senior citizens set up SMTP and POP3 settings. The most humbling thing ever. Like, you want to pull your hair out and bash your head against the wall, but extremely humbling, and I think helped set the foundation of my career.
All right, awesome.
All right, with that, thank you all very much for taking the time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
very much. Appreciate it.